Hello, Satanico here once again for God Loves Comics, and I've got a unboxing video yet again, even though I've already cut most of these out of the box. It is the biggest and the smallest of my comics hauls. Since I've been doing these videos, and I've only done a handful, of course, but the biggest and smallest in the sense that it is very small in quantity. I've only got 5 books. Very big in quality, since these are some of the bigger purchases. And once again, I always add the caveat that there are plenty of videos, there are plenty of comics collectors. I mean, the big guys, the big guns, the rich people, the people who are stockbrokers or doctors or whatever who, are opening $15,000 slabs. And that's not me. If I'm paying $50-$60 for a single comic, that is a very big purchase for me. If I'm paying a couple of $100 for a comic, then that is in record terrain for me, because most of the stuff that I have is stuff that I bought off the racks, off the shelves, when they came out, when I was a little kid or a teenager, or when I sort of got back into comics maybe in my 20s. But so back issues that I bought were usually cheap ones. And I've been a little bit loose lately in terms of my purchases. And just also to add that I already started this video, and for whatever reason it stopped on me twice, and so I talked quite a lot. I had opened a couple of these boxes, and so now I've got 3 comics here, and then I've just got this box. But this box has pretty major purchase in it from my perspective. But first of all, let's go into what I have here. The first comic is right here. Let's see if we can escape the glare a little bit. Dolphin. Showcase presents number 79, Dolphin. And this is a cover by J. Scott Pike. And you may or may not be familiar with J. Scott Pike. He sort of left. I think he did a number of romance comics, and then he sort of left comics and became more of a cheesecake erotica painter. I think had a very successful career. Maybe still alive, or maybe departed recently, but I think he's still alive. But I was unaware of J. Scott Pike. I was pretty much, this was before my time, and I wasn't really collecting sort of peripheral DC Comics titles anyway. But I sort of became aware of him when I was posting to the Facebook group romance covers. And I know that most fans are not into romance covers and romance comics at all, and neither am I. I never had any in my collection, still don't. But subsequently, particularly with stories like, the fact that John Romita Sr. kind of was recruited out of Marvel's romance line and took over for Steve Ditko, and really became sort of, the definitive Spider-Man artist along with Ditko. Very different styles, of course. And a lot of people, more mainstream fans tend to gravitate towards Romita style. Fans with a little bit more of an eccentric bent tend to gravitate towards Ditko. But Romita did a lot of really beautiful covers for the romance line. And then, in looking at these covers, I discovered that a lot of the Marvel stalwarts that you would never expect, people like Don Heck, Vinnie Coletta, Dick Giordano, who's more often associated with DC, but Dick Giordano did some stuff for Marvel, I do believe, on the romance line, and probably several others, but whose names escape me at the moment. But actually Joe Sinnott as well. There was a comic that Joe Sinnott did with Vinnie Coletta. Now, those are 2 of the preeminent, in some ways beloved on Sinnott's side, and often reviled in terms of Coletta's side, even though Coletta, whether he's my favorite inker, he's not. But he was very present on my favorite run of Kirby stuff, which was the 60s Thor stuff, which is incredible. Silver Age Thor, and that's mostly inked by Vinnie Coletta. But you have one book where Sanat, I think, penciled and Coletta inked Sanat. So that was kind of interesting because they're both so readily associated with inking Kirby. But the point is that I kind of discovered J. Scott Pike. He has some really sexy covers, some really beautiful girls, and then you see a cover like this, which is just lithe and subtle and very pretty, and almost minimalistic, and it's a really beautiful cover. And additionally, this was, of course, the first appearance of Dolphin. Now, I am not remotely familiar with Aquaman's sort of history. I'm not really familiar with anybody's history, even comics I grew up reading. If you ask me who did what and the first appearance of what, blah, 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 I don't really remember. It wasn't, it wasn't life-changing for me. But in this case, I do believe, if I'm remembering this correctly from what I've read about this, is that Dolphin at some point was Aquaman's lover. I guess he had a falling out with Mira or something, or she came along, and then Mira came back into the picture. Aquaman gave Aqualad his blessing to date Dolphin, and they married perhaps and had a child. And I'm actually just going on very foggy memory that Aquaman named their child Ceridian. But if someone knows this better than I do, you can correct me. I'm going by something that I read several weeks back. But either way, this is the first appearance of Dolphin, who now maybe was a peripheral character and still is, but she may be a more important character as Aquaman goes along, and the whole thing with maybe a movie will come out and it'll blow up or whatever. That may have tanked with Justice League, I guess, bombing, but either way, this is a pretty in-demand comic in terms of kind of being a low-key first appearance, and it is kind of perpetually unavailable in MyComicShop. Pretty rare to find a really nice copy on eBay. And so this was a guy was selling his eBay. He was on eBay selling his kind of Silver and Bronze Age comics, and they were all in really nice condition. Eventually, a lot of people caught on, and so there were a lot of bids. And this one I sniped right at the end. And as I did, I had a lot of really good luck in the past couple of weeks. We're only talking a few comics, but these were pretty popular comics, and I sniped them at the very end with bids that, with good bids, with good guesses that were just above what the person before me had bid, and usually in the final 20 seconds. Of course, when MyComicShop, I've mentioned this before, it just refreshes and gives another 3 minutes for somebody to outbid you, which of course can really jack up the price. I was surprised that nobody outbid me on the MyComicShop thing. But on eBay, I was able to pick this up. Really nice issue. Really sharp corners for the most part. A little tiny blending, but really nice there. And then it's got some spine ticks. It's probably got about 6 or 7 spine ticks, but pretty minor. The biggest issue is this little color break here, which I was hoping was just a color break or maybe even a production flaw. But in running my finger over it, it does feel like an actual little tear in the cover. Talking about a quarter to a third of an inch at the most. And that's probably the biggest flaw, as I said. Some spine ticks, but pretty minimal. I guess if I took it out of the bag, I might notice more. There's a tiny little, that I just noticed, a tiny little kind of indent right there. But other than that, it's listed as a very fine plus, and I would say, at the very least, I think a 7.5, but I think it's quite likely an 8. Someone else may disagree with me, of course. I'm not an expert grader, as the popular line goes on eBay, but I think can pretty confidently say at the very least a 7.5, and I think it could very well go for an 8 if I ever get it properly graded. But going over this little bit of text here, that I copied about this book. As I said, the cover pencils are by J. Scott Pike, really great artist, and I think has a pretty significant following. I'm not sure. I think he's still alive, but I'm not positive on that. He may have departed a couple of years ago. I'm not positive. I don't remember. But and then the text says I think this is from MyComicShop. There's an ad for Green Lantern number 65 and for Brave and the Bold number 81, the first appearance of Dolphin in this issue in the Fantasy at 14 Fathoms. The script and art are both by J. Scott Pike. I won't go into the plot on this, but, well, okay, the plot's kind of interesting. U.S. Navy frogmen cut into a sunken WW2 Navy ship to retrieve documents from a vault and spot a white-haired girl. White-haired? She looks like a blonde. When she's brought aboard, she turns blue from suffocation because she has gills, which is interesting. Don't see any gills on her on the cover. And with regular dips in the ocean, she falls for Chris, of course, and learns some English. It also has an ad for Captain Action, Action Boy, Dr. Evil Toys with art by Kurt Schaffenberger, who did a lot of Superman stuff, and an ad for 80-page giant Superman number 212. And then another story, a backup story, The Kid from Atlantis, with a script by Robert Bernstein and art by Ramona Fradon. And in this backup story, Aquaman helps Aqualad, a rejected child from Atlantis, to overcome his fear of fish, which is probably very detrimental to being Aqualad if you're afraid of fish. Aquaman adopts Aqualad as a sidekick. And there's also an article on What's in a Fanzine, which actually does interest me. And that's pretty much it. There's an ad for Captain Action number 2 with art by Gil Kane. I love Gil Kane. And so it is the first appearance of Dolphin, who, as I said, is maybe a relatively important character now in the Aquaman universe. And then it also is, I guess, it almost sounds like this is the first time Aquaman stumbled across Aqualad, but Aqualad, I'm sure, existed before this, and was a big part of Teen Titans and all of that stuff. So, but this, I don't know what this is, but, Aquaman adopts him as a sidekick, so that's the first of that as well. But either way, I know this is a pretty much a reasonably well sought after issue in terms of being kind of an under the radar first appearance, in terms of not being that ubiquitous out there. So I'm very happy to have this, a nice copy, and that's a good one. And so then this next box, this was from the same dealer on eBay, but I bought it a week later, and there we go. I may even have this copy already, or this issue already, but I couldn't pass it up. It's again, it's a second appearance of Man-Bat in Detective 402. Again, it's classic Neil Adams. This guy took really nice pictures where you could scroll, of course, over the spine, you could scroll over the right side, and then he had individual pictures of the corners and individual pictures of the book flat on its side so you can see the spine and everything. So I was familiar with the flaws that were in the book. There is a chip right there where my thumb is. Maybe you can see. Yeah, you can see. And then there's a tiny, tiny little crease there. Handful of spine ticks, but not bad. And there's a little tiny tear there, and maybe a little bit of a nick there as well. He has it listed as a fine plus, which seems reasonable. I think Dolphin's in better condition, but again, this may be a 6.5 or a 7. Again, someone may debate that. And if I take it out of the bag, first of all, I'm not seeing the back cover, but and there's a little bit of color loss there, but it's a nice cover. And a nice copy, I should say. Of course, it's a beautiful cover. And let's see. Let's go over some text for that as well. Okay, the cover by Neil Adams, of course, for this. The main story is called Man or Bat, with a script by Frank Robbins, which is always interesting. I wasn't around in comics at this point when these came out, and I certainly wasn't buying Batman at this point, but or Detective Comics either. So I was always only familiar with Frank Robbins from his work on Invaders, which was really an acquired taste, and I didn't like it at the time because you would get that bait and switch of seeing a beautiful Kirby cover, and then you would open to see the very, very stylized, kind of strange, old-fashioned art of Frank Robbins, which was very influenced by Milton Caniff, but, anyone this century was not particularly familiar with Milton Caniff, so it was an acquired taste. But I had no idea that Frank Robbins actually drew Batman stories, and more specifically and more importantly wrote stories, many of which were illustrated by Neil Adams or also by Gil Kane. So the interior art is also by Neil Adams with inks by Dick Giordano. And the plot is that Kirk Langstrom appears again as the Man-Bat. This time he's forced to become Batman's enemy after stealing a vial from the chemical company's safe, much to Batman's chagrin. Kirk returns to the lab above the Gotham Museum of Natural History. He believes he has finally found a mixture that can cure his transformation until Batman bursts through the door in pursuit, causing him enough surprise to drop the compound on the floor. So Man-Bat is just trying to cure himself, just like Ben Grimm and every other monster in comics, and Batman in his paranoia and his relentless pursuit screwed everything up for poor Man-Bat, dropped his vial. He'll never find the compound again, and never figure out where he got it from or how he made it or whatever. Whatever the ingredients are, they're so rare that he can never find them again, and Batman has really screwed it up for him. So, in fact, Man-Bat may be the hero here. With a screech of rage, Kirk fights off the Batman and leaps out the window. During his escape, he starts to evolve a leathery pair of wings that allow him to fly. Well, that's good, because, if you leap out the window and you don't evolve wings, you probably become Man-Splat instead of Man-Bat. That's improv there, ladies and gentlemen. Improv. Thank you. But, so very fortuitous they just evolved wings right when he jumped out the window. And then you've got a backup story, and once again, great artist. You've got My Place in the Sun, script by Mike Friedrich, pencils by Gil Kane, who I love, and inks by the aforementioned Vinnie Coletta, which hadn't even occurred to me. Speedy visits Robin at Hudson University. Robin begins to question if he should continue to be Robin. No, Robin, quit, or at least get a better outfit. And then it also has a letter from comics writer Martin Pasco, who I remember vaguely. I remember him primarily doing some Plastic Man stuff with that what I think was alongside. It was in Adventure Comics alongside Starman by Ditko. Wasn't the best stuff, but Martin Pasco is a pretty good writer. So that is that, and let's get on to the next comic, as I should be doing a podcast because my YouTube videos stay static for so long while I babble, right? Okay, this is a beauty. There it is. Conan 24. The classic Red Nails story. An issue that people had numerous bids on. I was able to snipe it at the very end. I think I beat the guy by 50 cents or 75 cents or something, and with the bid that I put in the last 15 seconds, so I wouldn't have been able to bid again. So, and I'm really happy with it. I have this issue. I have a really beat up issue that I bought used. Again, I wasn't on to Conan at this point, even though it's a 20-cent comic. I wasn't buying Conan at this point. I wasn't really, I was still pretty new to comics, or not in comics at all at this time. I was still a little kid. And so the Conan that I know was John Buscema and Ernie Chan. And subsequently, I always heard of Barry Windsor-Smith. I drooled over the idea of getting Barry Windsor-Smith stuff. These things were expensive back then. Sometimes the back issue was as much as $10, $12. So now I've got a Conan number 1. I've got most of the first 20 issues, and I've got a very nice upgrade of Conan number 24, this Red Nails. And beautiful cover, of course, one of the classic covers, and really nice condition. I think he's got it again as, I think he's just got first full appearance of Red Sonja, which I'll get into in a second, but I think he had it listed as a very fine plus to near mint. I think very fine is very accurate. It's not perfectly centered. As you can see, there's some white along the line, along the spine here. Spine ticks should show up pretty easily on this this red and black sort of spine, and I really don't see any. I may be overlooking them. Try to catch the light, but I really don't see any spine ticks. Tight corners on the right side, really tight corner, nice sharp corner at the top. So this issue is beautiful. It's a beautiful copy. Might be one of the comics I get slabbed and graded for the first time ever. And so it's a great upgrade, and I can actually, if I ever find my other back issue, I can just go ahead and read it. But yeah, beautiful comic. I was really happy to get it. And let's look a little bit at the text of this before I open the last box. Bear with me, I hope you don't mind. Cover, of course, by Barry Windsor-Smith. This is Red Nails story arc, and, of course, the Song of Red Sonja. This is the first full appearance of Red Sonja. Now, what was shocking about this is that for a long time, I think this is the more collectible of the two. Technically, the first appearance is in 23. I think it's just a cameo. This is the first appearance. This is on the cover. This is the first full appearance. She's throughout the story. It's the classic. And it's also, I believe, the last Barry Windsor-Smith issue. So, and it's considered really the apex of his Conan run. I think it's probably the apex of his career. He changed styles. He's an amazing artist. He's incredibly capable. He's still active on Facebook, but this was like his piece de resistance in terms of Conan, and one of the greatest Conan issues ever created, of course. But it was surprising that this seller had a 23 and a 24, and 23 actually sold for, I wouldn't say significantly more, but I mean, it sold for about $15, $16 more, which is pretty significant, because we're not talking a lot of money here, but, under $100 for sure. But still, that's a rarity, and the conditions were not, there was no difference in conditions. In fact, I would say that 24 was probably in slightly better condition. So what that means is that right now the marketplace is viewing number 23, or at least these particular bidders were viewing number 23 as the important first appearance, whereas previously the market was driven by art first, and this is the better cover. 23 is a cover by Gil Kane, who I love, but it's not really one of Gil's best covers. And it doesn't compare to this cover. So that's kind of interesting. And by comparison, if you look at like the classically, incredibly hot Hulk 181, that's the first full appearance of Wolverine, and Wolverine's on the cover. Hulk 180 is actually the first appearance of Wolverine, but it's in a cameo. So it's almost the same situation. Obviously, Wolverine's an infinitely more important and collectible and valuable and crucial character in the Marvel Universe than Red Sonja. But in terms of, 180 is really technically the first appearance, but 181 is the collectible. It's the monster that just won't quit, that people are, buying up, and it continues to skyrocket in price. So, but I'm confident in this issue, because I just believe in the end that the aesthetics of this issue will win out, and the quality of this issue. but I tend to value art more than I do first appearances or character arcs or any of that stuff. So, beautiful issue. And as I was saying, let's see, this is The Song of Red Sonja, script by Roy Thomas, of course, who wrote tons and tons of Conan. Barry Windsor-Smith pencils. The setting is Makalet, whatever that means. Conan and Red Sonja start a bar fight, bathe in a fountain. Nice. I remember that scene. Scale temple walls, break in and steal a snake tiara, which everybody has to have, and fight a magical snake. Okay. At the end, Sonja tricks Conan and leaves for Pas de Chat. The Red Sonja story continues in Savage Sword of Conan #1. This is the final Windsor-Smith art on this title, and never came back, which was tragic and unfortunate because Roy Thomas, I think, really liked him. I assume they get along good, but I don't know exactly what happened. I haven't read enough. I haven't read any serious interviews with Barry Windsor-Smith to know exactly what his thinking was there. The art in this issue, this is a part of the problem, though. The art in this issue, at least on page 8 and perhaps elsewhere, was altered without Windsor-Smith's approval. So that may have been the bridge that was burned on Marvel's behalf. And then it says, see Marvel Treasury Edition number 15 or Savage Sword of Conan, 82 for the original version. Now, I actually have the Marvel Treasury Edition 15 as well that I bought on eBay for about 12 or 13 bucks like 10 years ago. I just don't know where I put it. I've been looking for it for quite a while, and I don't know where I put it. But I would love to look at it and compare that version to this version and just see what the alterations were. And it'd be interesting also to know who did the alterations. I mean, John Romita Sr. in particular was well known for altering faces, particularly for Jack Kirby, you know, and John Buscema also was sort of the house artist of Marvel, and of course, dominant artist on Conan. So it could have been done by either one of them, or who knows, maybe, I don't know. In the letters column, Roy Thomas responds and announces Barry Smith's final departure as Conan the Barbarian artist. Incidentally, Roy's responses to R. Benitez and Keith Taylor are mistakenly transposed. So, again, I'm not quite sure what the backstory is there and what they mean by mistakenly transposed, but all of those little interesting bits of ephemera are always what make the original comic worthwhile when you consider how many zillions of times these things have been reprinted. The real value in things like the older original comics, particularly, you know, really old comics, which are a lot of times copyright free and available online now, is still being able to see the letters, pages, and stuff like that, even though you can see those online too. So, but anyway, I like the ephemera. Okay, we get to this box, and this is the biggest purchase in this collection. And here we are at 30 minutes after revealing 3 comics. I'm probably the only person who babbles at this insane length over 3 comics. What can I say? God is in the details, but probably not in the viewership. Alright, this is well packaged as well. Okay, it's in here. MyComicShop, you can rely on them to really, they put their stuff in a really nice box that fits in your mailbox. And then these have backing boards. Of course, this is a pretty big purchase, all things considered. A little bit bigger than I thought. And some backing board, and then there. Alrighty. And these are bagged and boarded, but then also placed in another bag together. We get to these 2 comics and I wrap it up. I will wrap it up, I promise. This one's pretty well sealed in there. Okay, I'm pretty excited about seeing the condition of one of these comics, and I'm very happy with this one as well. This is Piracy #4, and that copy is beautiful. I've seen some copies online that are pretty beat up, not as beat up as some of the older EC comics. Piracy, I believe, was in. Let's see, was Piracy in the New Wave, the EC New Wave? It doesn't show a comics code, so maybe not. But this is a beautiful copy. Really, it's got a little scuffing or something there, almost a little smudge, but beautiful spine for a comic from the 50s, and the color. That red color, that just beautiful red, this cover is minty fresh. It's not a mint condition issue, apparently. It's listed as fine plus 6.5. In the bag, to me, it almost looks like a 9, but definitely I'm sure they didn't value it that much, but it is a beautiful issue. Just a few, like a little crinkle there, a few spine ticks, and then it's really difficult to see in the bag very many flaws. Wow, beautiful comic though. I mean, if I saw this in a comic store, I would swear this was a recent reprint, At the very least, a Russ Cochran reprint, but even more recent than that. I mean, I bought like a Hit Comics that was a reprint recently for like $16 or something that I showed in a prior video. So yeah, beautiful cover, beautiful issue. Reed Crandall did the cover, one of the greats, really well known for his his Blackhawk covers. If you ever get a chance to go back and look at those, but of course he did a lot of fantastic work for EC. One of the great EC stable of artists. Let's see. Piracy #4 was published in 1955. It is EC's New Direction Comics after the tragic seduction of the innocent hearings and subsequent self-imposed censorship of comics. But I think it was before, there is no comics code on this, so they had agreed to self-censor their line, which of course led sort of to the demise of EC. I feel like if they had hung in there, they could have, the quality of their work was so brilliant that people could have gotten over the fact that there wasn't so much grotesque violence, even though I believe that the war comics, and particularly, well, the weird fantasy comics tend to be some of the most collectible, and they weren't violent at all particularly, but the horror comics, I think, were big sellers, and they were absolutely gruesome. So this is the New Direction, and Pirate Master is art by Reed Crandall. By the Book is art by George Evans, another great artist who I love. And the Sheba, these last two artists are, real masters too. The Sheba is by Graham Ghastly Ingalls. So I'm really interested in seeing that story. Of course, Ghastly Ingalls, best known for his incredible work on their horror line. But, so that's, I purchased this because of these artists. Crandall, Evans, Ingalls, and then the final story, The Inheritance, is by Bernie Krigstein. So, and Bernie Krigstein, best known for the incredible story Master Race, which kind of redefined what comics could do, and just considered an absolute master as well of storytelling. He's not as beloved, certainly, as Al Williamson or Frank Frazetta, because, he's more along the lines of a Harvey Kurtzman, where he's recognized for, his brilliance in the medium in terms of his storytelling brilliance, and not so much of his, technical, and, not so much the beauty of his drawings. But, yeah, it's a beautiful issue, and very happy with that one. And let's see if I can get this final one out. It is in a really it's really tight in this bag, in this Mylar Snuggie. And this is one of the big boys of my collection now. And this is quite possibly, this is often referred to as the greatest cover in the history of comics. It's a crazily subjective term, of course, but it's one that even if you disagree that this is the greatest cover, you would have trouble arguing that it's not one of the greatest covers ever to appear in comics. There it is, the masterpiece. Weird Science Fantasy number 29. I never ever thought I would have an actual copy of this comic. And a really nice looking copy, by the way. Just thrilled to have this. This is listed on MyComicShop as a 3.5. There were a lot of bids, and I put in a pretty solid bid at the end, but one that I was a little bit surprised that it just went through and there was no final fight for it, because if it had gone up too much, if it had gone up much more than this, I don't think I would have purchased it. But 3.5 is how they graded it raw. I think looking at it, it could be a 4 if it got slabbed. Could be a 4. Beautiful spine. Of course, it's got ticks. It's got a for a 3.5, it's a beautiful looking. By the way, it's a beautiful book in general, and it's a beautiful 3.5, and it's the best looking EC comic I have. This piracy being not included. The piracy was kind of a little bit later in the EC run, but this is just one of the masterpieces. I first saw this comics cover in the Overstreet Price Guide way back when I was a kid, and I was fascinated, of course, with dinosaurs and cavemen, and the visceral beauty and brutality of this cover is just unlike anything else I'd ever seen, and still unlike. This may be the best portrait of Neanderthals or whatever, if they're Peking man or whatever, early man, savage early man, that you will ever see anywhere by anyone. One of the greatest illustrations of, cavemen ever. Look at this guy's, look at his gnarled foot, his leg, the details in that gnarled foot. Can't see that well on this video, because of the resolution, because of the bag, the Mylar. And then, just the sinew and the muscles, the kinetic energy, and it's just an incredible cover. And throw in the fact that, okay, this is a very cherished Frazetta cover that was originally done for Famous Funnies. He did some incredible covers for Famous Funnies. This one was rejected, apparently, because it was too violent. He resubmitted it for EC with a few minor changes, and of course there was nothing too violent for EC at the time, even though their covers weren't going to be as violent as the interior. But then also toss in, it has probably my favorite EC artist, even though Frazetta's up there, but Frazetta didn't do that much work for them. But in Al Williamson with Roy Krinkle in the interior as well. Yeah, just a masterpiece, and thrilled to get this book. It looks fantastic in person in this Mylar, and just a terrific purchase. And just to go into a little bit of quick detail on this before I sign off, I'm so sorry I've run so long for 5 comics, but hopefully you enjoyed some of the details, the 4 or 5 people that may watch this. But often called the greatest comics cover in history, and in fact, Frank Frazetta, a curator, sort of rescued the original art for Frank and cleaned it up a little bit for him and returned it to him you know, and Frank Frazetta wrote him a personal note saying that this was one of his best works ever, and that, which is really significant. If you've seen how much Frank Frazetta's original art goes for now at heritage auctions, you're talking sometimes $250,000, sometimes close to $500,000 for some of his, you know, incredible paintings. And this cover would be just absolute. It would just be astronomical in terms of price. So, and the interior of this comic, this was also the last issue of Weird Science Fantasy, so it was kind of right on the cusp, along with the piracy of, you know, the change in the EC line. And after this, it would become Incredible Science Fiction, which is not nearly as collectible, even though Incredible Science Fiction still has many great artists. But this also has interiors by Wally Wood on The Chosen One, Vicious Circle, art by Al Williamson and Roy Krinkle, Genesis, art by Reed Crandall, who did the cover of Piracy, and Adam Link in the Business, art by the great Joe Orlando, who sometimes is too overlooked amid so many great artists, and a story by Earl and Otto Binder, two great science fiction writers of the time period, who went by Indo Binder when they were working together. Classic Frank Frazetta cover, sometimes cited as the greatest ever. Was originally drawn as a Buck Rogers cover for Famous Funnies 217, but altered slightly for its appearance here. In an interview, Frazetta said something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't remember exactly what he said and couldn't find the magazine for it, but that what made his art special, what differentiated it, what made him stand out from the pack, was that he was able to imbue his figures with like a true savagery and the violence of mankind, and in a way that you didn't see in other artists, and that was what he viewed as his true strength, and kind of making transparent the savagery of humankind. If you just applied that quote just to this cover, it's perfectly fitting. I mean, this cover is the savagery of mankind in his various evolutions. I mean, you know, early man and then later man, who I guess was intended to be Buck Rogers, which, which may have been Buster Crabbe. So anyway, thrilled with this copy. And by the way, a final thing is that, I looked this up. I think I get a pretty good deal on it, all things considered, especially if I get it slabbed. And if I am ever going to get anything put in a slab, which generally I've never been a fan of, it would be this comic. This comic deserves it. And really, if I want to thumb through it and read, the beautiful work of Al Williamson and Reed Crandall, I could do that in a reprint or even online. So, but there's, like, on eBay, there are copies of this. There is an absolutely destroyed copy on eBay with not just a separated cover, but, the cover is just, the front cover is just like a piece of the cover is just sitting there. It's missing big chunks. It's missing almost the whole spine, a big chunk here, and it's just kind of sitting on top of the blank book. And it is listed for almost the same price as I paid for this, which is a 3.5 or a 4, and with just these spine ticks, and it's got some creases here, a little bit of denting here. This cover looks alright. This corner looks alright, and then it's got some pretty heavy spine ticks, creases along, and a color break there, a little bit of a color break there, a little bit of couple of tears, pretty significant tear there, but all things considered, it presents beautifully, looks beautiful in the back. But so anyway, there was a copy on there. It's absolutely destroyed for the same price I paid for this. And then there's another copy that is coverless that somebody's charging $70 for, which is cheap, but it's coverless. And then he has made a color photocopy of the original cover and just stapled it on really haphazardly. Like, the staples are way over here. So if you open the book, you know how that's going to be when the staples aren't even in the spine; they're way over here. So and nobody spit on that thing. It would probably be better off if he had just left it coverless. But you know, at last check, nobody had even taken a bite out of that. So in MyComicShop has a CGC. I'm starting to go unconscious here, apparently, in terms of my verbal skills, but has a CGC slabbed 4.0 for $430. And it's not a consignment. Consignments, it's worth noting, consignments usually, are people who can put any price they want, and they tend to be really overpriced because people are really hopeful of getting a real big score on what they're selling. So this is straight from MyComicShop. It's at $430, and I feel like this could be I didn't pay nearly that for it, so I feel like it would be a good buy either way. And in viewing that scan of the 4.0, it has a major spine split, which this one does not have. Most of my other EC comics do. There is no spine split here as far as I can tell. Looks like the staples are very intact. I mean, it's got spine wear, but it's not split. Major, like 4 to 5 inches spine split from the top staple. And also has a subscription crease, which is the big crease. That's a color-breaking crease all the way down. You stop seeing it around the mid, but it is a subscription crease, and which is significant. You can't probably grade a comic over 5.0 when it has that crease. So it has fewer ticks on the spine, a little bit less stress on the spine, but I would say the spine split and the subscription crease makes it look worse than this copy. So I'm very happy with this copy. And that's it. I've done far enough battling, far more than I should have, but that's probably the biggest haul I'm going to have for anytime soon in terms of investment that I put into these, and I'm very happy with every single one of these comics. So there's not like there's nothing shoddy in here at all. These are all beautiful copies and beautiful issues, and all highly collectible. And most importantly for me, all great artists, like the best of the best in terms of mainstream comics, certainly. So that's it for this episode of God Loves Comics, and thanks so much for listening, if in fact you did listen. And once again, there is the God Loves Comics Facebook group. All you have to do is search God Loves Comics, and it should pop right up, and I'm the administrator, so I will approve you as long as you're not a Trump fan. So that's it for now. Thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.